Welcome to the Alcohol Addiction Podcast. I am, of course, your host, Lee Davey, and today I'm speaking to Stephen Pfleiderer. How's life, Stephen?
Life is good. Just woke up here in San Francisco, California. Can't complain.
That's what I call a well-manicured beard. You know, in today's life, people just don't care about their beard. I mean, look at mine. It's a mess, right? And yours is just like perfectly manicured. First question is, when did you start to become so concerned about manicuring that perfect beard?
That's a great question. Actually, I grew up my whole life. My father had a beard, and I stubbornly refused to grow my own beard. And I actually, I would clean shave every day, and I just didn't want to be like my father. And then this past December was a really challenging month in my life, and I was kind of taking some risks out of my comfort zone. And here in San Francisco, people have these what's called these razor scooters to get around town really quickly, and they're a kick scooter, so how you get around. And my brother, he told me, don't ride the scooter in the rain, Stephen. It's not a good idea. The brake doesn't work, and my ego, still likes to push the edge and says, I can do this. And so it had been raining, and I went to go meet a colleague for lunch, and after the lunch got out, it had stopped raining, and I thought, I don't need to take a car back to my apartment. I'll just scooter back home. And I was on one of the main roads here in San Francisco, and a pickup truck came out of nowhere, and I ended up going straight over the handlebars, and my wheel stopped. And so what happened was my face went right into the concrete, and I split open my chin, and all these people came up to help me. I had to go to the hospital, get a couple stitches put in, and I couldn't shave.
Right.
And all of a sudden, I couldn't shave, and the beard started to grow out. And I started getting all this positive feedback, and people were like, we love this beard. And so I kept it ever since. And my girlfriend was also just really loving it and told me that she really wanted me to keep it around. And so that was the motivation I needed to keep it clean. And I started learning about beards and all the different things. And so there you have it.
Hey, if you would have grown the beard before you had your crash, maybe it would have cushioned the blow a little bit, I'm just jealous. I'm 42 years of age and I've only just started to grow body hair. I was one of those kids in school that used to look around the changing rooms and I was the only one without pubes. I mean, that's my life to a T, that is, always the latest one to develop. Anyway, enough about my pubes. Let's get to the very beginning of your life. Dodging your pubic hairs, and we'll just talk about your earliest memories of alcohol. What was can you remember the first time that you ever had a drink?
Absolutely. So I grew up in Palo Alto, which is right down the road from here. It's a great town, great family, and I didn't actually touch my first drink of alcohol to the early age of 15. I held out as long as I possibly could. Mm-hmm. And a friend of mine, remember going through his dad's fridge, and his dad had some beers in there, and there was enough beers that he could take that his dad wouldn't notice. And I just remember kind of feeling nervous and also feeling excited because I had, gone to all these, don't do drugs, don't drink presentations in middle school, and I thought, I knew I was kind of breaking the law, but I also had this excitement of, what's this going to feel like and all that. And I remember we hiked up onto this hill up on the Stanford campus. He lived on the Stanford campus. And I remember that vividly, that first drink and how it felt. And I remember immediately wanting to have a second one.
Right.
The first time I had it, because I thought if one is good, more has got to be.
Yeah.
And what's funny is that friend of mine, he years down the road, I reunited with him about 15 years past that experience, and I had seen him on and off, and I got into recovery when I was 21 years old, and that completely changed my life. It wasn't in my plan, but I ended up reuniting with him at an event, and I found out that he later down the road found recovery himself. So the guy that I had my first beer with, and a funny story about that as well is I remember being really, really nervous about going home and getting in trouble with my parents, because I had good parents, they had good family. My mom used to wait up all the time, kind of watching out for me. And so I remember insisting going to the fast food restaurant to get a soda or something to cover up the smell of the alcohol. And but I vividly remember that effect and that warm feeling that alcohol gave me. And I knew that I wanted to do it again. I knew immediately that I wanted to do that again.
I asked my son he's 16 now, and he's just started to flirt with having drinks every now and then. You know, he doesn't live with me, so I don't have any control over it. But I was in the car with my mother and my boy, and I said to my mum, "Did you allow me to drink at that age?" And she said, "No, but it didn't stop you." She said, "I knew you were still going to the pub. I knew you were still doing what you were doing." And where I grew up, Stephen, we never really considered it illegal or against the law. That wasn't what we were worried about as such. We didn't even think about it. To us, it was just what everybody did. And to the large degree that the parents, particularly the fathers, really had such leeway with it. Like, they really didn't want you to get drunk, but they had no problem with you drinking. And that then leads to a, oh, well, it's okay kind of attitude. And you, of course, people don't realize the true nature of addiction. You know, even my dad now in his 60s, he'll never admit that he's addicted to alcohol in a million years, you know. So it's quite a shame, really. When did you realize that drinking had developed into a problem rather than just, like, you know, millions of people around the world drink all right and they think they're all right? When did you realize you had a problem?
That's a great question. I also, just latching on to your father, my heart goes out to you and to him about not realizing that the term addicted is kind of one of the barriers that I've seen as to getting into making changes. And I'm excited during our conversation to kind of, I've developed some ways of breaking through that kind of some of those common issues that I see in my work. And I also saw in myself with, really being able to make changes. So I'm excited to talk about how to address those type of things and break through that. Maybe that could be helpful to your father, I don't know, or someone listening. But there's a lot of kind of things I'm seeing within the industry and also within kind of recovery movement that I think hold some people back from getting the help they need.
Well, let's do that now then. Don't worry about. Let's not lose our momentum. Let's do that now then. Let me set you off. My father would never admit that he has a problem with alcohol. Mm-hmm. My counter argument would be, you've been drinking it every weekend since you were 14. You're now 66. Mm-hmm. I see alcoholism on a spectrum. Here you've got somebody who doesn't drink. Here you've got the brown paper bag underneath the railway bridge drinking neat vodka. And then along that line, somewhere along that line, you are going to lose control of alcohol, and alcohol will have control. At that point, you lose control. And what I mean by lose control, you cannot stop drinking. At that point, you fall under the loose definition of an alcoholic, right? So I know so many people who I believe fall into that category, who would never listen to this podcast because they would never think they have a problem. And if they did listen to this podcast and they heard me saying that I'm an alcoholic, they would say that I was never an alcoholic, that I'm an imposter, that I'm a fraud, that I'm a fake, because there is no way that I'm an alcoholic. Because if I am an alcoholic, they have to be an alcoholic. Now, so I guess my question is, how do you deal with somebody, I guess, who has got an inkling that there might be a problem, but they're fighting against this stigma of alcoholism?
I love that question, and that's something I've, myself, I've moved away from labeling the terms alcoholic and addict and all those things. They can be helpful to kind of remind ourselves that there's a problem here, and I think there's a value to that. at the same time, it kind of puts a box of there's like one club, like the alcoholic club, and then the non-alcoholic club. And like you said, human beings are kind of on a spectrum, and not everybody, drinks the same drinks. Not everybody drinks for the same amount of time, and also to the severity, or has the same amount of consequences. So every person is a very different individual. And I see that, like you said, I used to watch, there's a show here in the U.S. called Intervention, very popular show, very dramatic. And I used to sit on my couch, and when I was in college, and I went to music school, and I was at Johns Hopkins University, really great school, and I used to sit in the luxury nice apartment, and I'd just be slamming beers by myself, watching this show, Intervention, and seeing people with some more devastating consequences, like you talked about the guy under the bridge, or something with trauma. And I go, look at these idiots, I don't have a problem. Look at that.
While you've got your beer.
Oh, I got my beer. Oh, yes, and but I remember the first, one of my first cases that I had working with an individual. He was very, very successful. He was almost making $1 million a year in sales, but he was dying of alcohol abuse and alcohol misuse, and what we would call is a substance use disorder, is what the latest clinical term is. And like you said, which is absolutely right, is substance use disorder occurs on a spectrum from mild all the way to severe. And I realize now, looking at my past experience, I was probably in the mild, moving into the moderate zone. And I feel very grateful that I was able to take that information and decide myself which way do I want my life to go. But what happened was exactly what you're saying, and what I see very common is what we would call, there's a book called The High Functioning Alcoholic, with people who have a job, people that haven't lost their family, people that are able to pay their taxes, things of that nature, but every day they're drinking in a way that is causing consequences to their life in some way. Now, many people are and I admire many people that struggle with addictions and habits, because they're some of the most charismatic, awesome, fun people, and they're very disciplined. They're able to maintain that lifestyle, and other responsibilities in life is very challenging. And so what I do is ask a series of motivational questions, is kind of getting away from, I'm not that bad, to kind of saying, it sounds like this isn't a problem for you. And, everyone else in your life is kind of coming to me. I'm working with them. They're really concerned. What do you make of that? Is it they need to have treatment, and then kind of bringing these pieces together. And then, also getting them to think about, like you said, that spectrum. There's what they've defined in the National Institute of Drug and Alcohol Abuse in the United States here as what would be health limits of consumption of alcohol. See, it's interesting with heroin or methamphetamine or other drugs. There's something that would not be a healthy, moderate use of that substance. But with alcohol, there are people that drink in a way that it doesn't cause harm to their life. And the institute here in the country has defined those limits, and they're different for men versus women. And I've also done some research in the UK and then Australia and other places in the world. They have healthy, moderate consumption levels. And so I bring up those points, and then I bring up, and I completely agree with the people when they're telling me, hey, I'm not an alcoholic. Don't put that label on me. I'm not that bad. I can do this. I can do that. And so I say, well, are you saying that you're in the healthy limit then? And then I ask them if they're open to learning what those are. And then it is a fact of the research that 22 million people right now are what we call in that gray zone between mild to moderate area of the substance use disorder. And those people who could benefit from treatment are not getting it. And the industry right now caters to the most severe, at least for residential treatment, is catering to severe cases. And that's what the media has focused on. That's what a lot of movies and people see, and they get these idea of what someone is that struggles with a substance use issue. But the fact is, many people that you wouldn't know, 1 in 10 people right now are struggling with some type of substance misuse problem, and they're untreated. They don't know where to get help. They don't know how to make those changes. And they're completely, because it's like you said, reinforced by the society we live in and celebrated, that it's normal.
Well, just think about your words then that you used about the healthy limits of drinking alcohol, and they use that term in the UK as well. You know, here are the healthy limits. How could it be healthy to drink a poison? It doesn't matter what the limit is. Like if you get a shot of vodka neat with nothing in it and you drink it, it's going to be within the healthy limits. But it's a powerful toxin. Your body will want to vomit it up. There's nothing healthy about it. And I think if people are listening to this podcast, they're doing so because they either believe they have a problem and they're reaching out to solve that problem, or they have a feeling. This is how it worked for me. You know, people say to me, how many times did you try to give up drinking, Lee? I tried once and succeeded once. Completely different to smoking, where I tried and failed thousands of times. With drinking, I only tried once, because to me it was inconceivable to quit drinking alcohol. Inconceivable. If I was to quit alcohol, right, I would be a zombie where I lived. Nobody would touch me with a barge pole. It wasn't even on the table, right? Cutting down, maybe. Did I ever wake up with an hangover thinking I'm never gonna fucking drink again? Yeah, every weekend. But I never ever said I'm gonna give up drinking, right? There will be people like that on this call now, yeah? What would you suggest to those people who are thinking to themselves, there's something quite not right here? The intuition. Because think about it. Consuming a powerful toxin goes against Mother Nature. So your intuition is going to tell you not to do it, but our conditioning and our past conditioning and the marketing and the advertising and the healthy limits and all this kind of stuff, it forces that intuition down, doesn't it? So what advice would you give to people?
That's a really great question, and I run into that all the time. And working with habits and addictions, I listened to your podcast with Dr. Burns, which was fantastic, and he, who I've been really grateful to, have worked with and mentored with, and learned a tremendous amount about, the barriers. And he talked about resistance to making changes, and there's two types. One's the outcome. Do I actually want to be, clean and sober? Like if I didn't have to do anything, do I want that? And then part B is, am I willing to do whatever it takes to make those changes? And most of the time, and I'll set it up for you, you can say, hey man, I'm going to take away probably the most pleasurable thing you got going in your life, something that gives you reward, gives you a stress relief, it makes you feel good. You might feel more confident. You might, be better in feel better in all kinds of areas. You might have a thing that it's better, can't sleep very well, so it helps you pass out. All kinds of wonderful things, and then you feel like you're able to celebrate on holidays. There's all kinds of, things that are just awesome about it. And I don't beat around the bush. And I'm going to say, hey, I'm going to take that away from you. So most people at that point they're like, I'm done with this conversation. And I also say, in order to make it so you can get to a healthy state of enjoying sobriety, and where you're able to get pleasure in basic things in life, like going out and seeing the sunshine or seeing a baby smile or just going for a walk. Most of the time when people would say that to me when I was drinking, I'd be like, are you insane? Like, do you think I just want to go to a movie or to the cinema on Friday nights and just, are you kidding me? Like, why would I do that when I could be drinking? And so that's a very powerful mindset. And then part B to your question, what's so important is that hurdle that people need to go through a lot of pain, go through withdrawal, go through discomfort, change the routine, work against their brain, which is craving, that really wants to drink every day. I remember when I first got into recovery, it was about 4 months until I went a day where I didn't think about alcohol. I thought about it every day. I was just like, I was in college and there was all kinds of, parties going on. So I thought about it all the time. And it was amazing that people said to me, and this is also another plug, is it's important to have a guide. It's important to have someone that's further down the path that can show you the way.
Yeah.
the biggest thing is a lot of people don't believe. They might just think I'm BSing to say, give this a try for 3 months, and then you can go back to your old lifestyle. That's where I don't care if someone says, hey, you know what, I think I can drink in a healthy way, a moderate way where it doesn't impact my life. I say, awesome. Here's what I'm going to require of you if you want to work with me.
Yeah.
You're going to have to be completely sober for at least 3 months, and then we can try that experiment. If that person then in themselves, and the listeners, I would say, if you notice that that would be difficult for you, that would be hard, then that's something to think about, that there's a dependence there. If you can't go for 90 days without a drink, and then I'm going to tell you, we're not talking about the rest of your life. We're talking about in 90 days you can have it.
What you just said then about if you can't go 90 days without a drink, then there may be a dependency. Do you know when I said about that scale of what I call the alcoholism scale, or whatever you want to call it, with the brown paper bag guy and the guy here who doesn't even drink? Yeah. To me, I don't even go as far as 90 days. I say to my friends, if you cannot go out this weekend and not drink, and you give me all your bullshit excuses that it's not that you can't, you want to, right?
Yeah.
If that's something going on there. You've lost control, and you really need to look at that. I just want to recap what you just said there, and then open it back up for discussion again, because I think it's really important. If you've come onto this podcast and you're thinking to yourself, I don't feel like this alcohol thing is doing things for me. I'm losing my phone. I'm getting into fights all the time. I'm waking up next to strange bearded guys in the bed in the morning. And you're coming on here and you're thinking to yourself, I'm going to try and give this a go. I want you to know that part of you giving it a go is you're going to meet resistance. You are going to kid yourself into believing that you can't do it. You're going to kid yourself into believing that you don't want to do it. You're going to kid yourself into believing that it's okay to moderate. You're going to believe all these different types of things. So you need to prepare yourself for that. Stephen talked about outcome and process resistance, right? When you turn around and say you don't want to do the work, that's your addiction talking that you don't want to do the work, right? But you won't understand that, and you won't get to grips with that, and you'll start beating yourself up, right? One of the critical things here, in my opinion, when you do the work, is opening your mind and having an open mind. And instead of looking at Stephen and saying, do you know what? This guy's full of shit. He's saying that all these issues are just my thoughts. Instead of having that thought, which prevents you from doing the work, which is a form of resistance, look at Stephen and say, actually, he's sober. And he's been sober since he's 21. And he spends his entire life helping people become sober. Maybe, just fucking maybe, he knows what he's on about. So maybe I will listen to him, even though it's difficult. Even though I'm getting resistance, I will keep that open mind. I don't know if you want to comment on any of that I just said.
Well, if anyone's thinking that I'm full of shit, I'm so excited and love that, because when I first came across people that were sober, I wanted to get as far away from them as possible. I remember one of the last nights I drank, and I ran into some friends in town, and they wanted to go do some sober activities, and I told my buddy who I was partying with, I was like, we got to get the hell out of here real quick. These people are going to be a party pooper and a buzzkill. Yeah. And I remember people telling me when I first got into recovery that, don't quit before the miracle, something like that, or, the bar will always be there. Like, it's not going anywhere. The liquor store is going to be there. The bar is going to be there. You can always go back if you choose to at some point, but why not give yourself a chance to try something for an experiment and see if your life doesn't improve? Because you can go back, and that's fine. And that kind of made my mind open up just to say, hey, why don't I just do something different for a minute? And if it sucks, then I can go back to it. And what ended up happening is, don't get me wrong, I've had hard days. I've had sucky days. I've had bad moods. I've had challenges. But I started to, become feeling better, sleeping better. My family was off my back. I got out of an unhealthy relationship I was in. I started making all these changes, and I just was like, kind of got curious. Is there's something to this, that the people I was surrounding myself with weren't lying to me, but my brain was lying to me. And that's, like you said, is part of the challenge. Is our brains are very tricky, and when we get stuck in these patterns, they're very challenging to break out of, and it seems hopeless. It seems impossible. And I've read studies that it can take up to a year for the brain, depending on what the person's taking and putting into their body and things like that, to go back to a homeostasis, where I imagine some of your listeners just drink to feel normal. If they're not drinking, they feel depressed or bad, or like they can't get through the day without a drink, because drinking helps you feel normal. And that's exactly what the addiction does to us, is we become dependent to just function, to get through the day. And then when we stop, we feel worse. And that makes us motivated to go back to what makes us feel better. And what I ask people to do is to say, and this is sucky, I wish I could push a button and say, you didn't have this. Say, hey, I'll weather the storm with you. I'll support you through this. And there is a pot of gold at the end of that rainbow, but you have to pay the price, and it's not the best price in the world to feel better. And you're going to feel tempted. You're going to have cravings. But are you willing to do something different today? Not tomorrow, today, and try that experiment.
I think what you just said there is like super important, is, again, I'm speaking to people out there who want to quit drinking alcohol. Stephen said we drink alcohol because that's normal to us. It allows us to escape what is otherwise difficult, the difficult parts of our life, right? So thinking about lying around the house thinking, God, it's got to be more to life than this. I hate my job. I'm arguing with my partner all the time. I've got self-loathing. I've got acne. Everybody's looking at me like I'm a weirdo. I haven't got a girlfriend. All these different types of things will lead you to drinking. And what Stephen is saying, I guess, is here now is once you then stop drinking, you do an experiment, then all of a sudden you have to face your life for what it is. Okay, and this is where the resistance now comes up, because you don't want to do that. And Stephen talked there about the pot of gold at the end of it. So what Stephen's saying there is you've got to learn to suffer. So you've got to look at your life and you've got to deal with your shit, which is a form of suffering. There's not the pot of gold at the rainbow for me isn't always like doesn't always look like you think it will look. So for me, when I got clear of alcohol, Stephen, and I looked at looked at my life, so I put that behind me, and now I've got my sober life. It was hard. I had no friends anymore. I didn't recognize my family. They didn't recognize me. I didn't recognize my son. He didn't recognize me. I didn't know what to do with myself. I felt unloved. I felt disconnected, right? That doesn't look like a pot of gold, right? It's still part of the suffering that you need to go through. And the work means that you need to say to yourself, okay, so I've lost everybody. Right. Where are all these new people I'm going to meet who are going to be like-minded like me that are going to take me on the next level? That is the pot of gold. That is the work. But like Stephen said, you need to be prepared for this. It's almost like jumping in the trenches, right? You need to have the artillery. You need to be ready for it, right?
I love what you're saying. I had the very similar experiences that I had a lot of loss when I got into recovery, and I thought, oh, well, now I'm doing this, like things should be better. It's like, but I had created some wreckage along the way, and I started waking up to that, and I had some cleaning up to do, and I'm grateful for the people that I lost because they weren't my true friends. They were my drinking buddies. All we did was sit around and drink together, and once I didn't do that, they didn't want anything to do with me, and that was good information that now in my life I found people that are a friend. When I call them and I need something, they're there, and I can be that, and that's like a gift, but that didn't happen on day one. That didn't happen right away. I'm grateful that the relationship I was in, which was very unhealthy, and I would drink all the time when I was really angry with my partner instead of talking about that. And I'm grateful once I got into recovery that relationship, I started getting better. I started changing, and she didn't like that at the time, and we ended up separating. And I thought it was the worst thing in the world. Bad news. I lose my girlfriend. And it was the best thing that could have happened, and it put me on a better path. Mm-hmm. And what I like to talk about with this issue that we're kind of hammering in on is one of my mentors talked about two parallel lines. It's two people, and there's two lines, and they're going down the path of life. Time's going by, and there's two parallel lines they're going. If you just edge one of the lines ever so slightly, just slightly, the whole trajectory of that person's life, and that's say the line is your life, and if you edge that just slightly over time, that line goes in a completely different way than the other line. And what I tell you is, looking back over a decade now, the people that I saw continuing on the party lifestyle, whether they need to be in formal treatment or not, they have a very different life than the life I'm living. And I latched on to that today, for some of your listeners, could be that moment in the parallel lines where they get a shift. They decide to do something different today, to pick up the phone, to call a support group, to call a therapist, to reach out, to go and get some help and figure that out, or pick up a book. We'll get into that. I'll give you different books and resources. And that could be the beginning. They say the journey of 1,000 miles or whatever starts with a single step. And I believe I'm grateful that I took that opportunity to latch on to, if I make one small change today, that can put me on a totally different path. I wouldn't be talking to you right now because I would probably be drunk doing some crazy stuff. I might be in jail. I might have been in the hospital. I've gotten calls and people have tragic accidents. I'm grateful that I latched and said, hey, I love partying. Don't get me wrong. It is fun. I love doing it. I still go out and have a great time. I've found wonderful ways to do that. We can get into how to build that into your life, because I like to be like the drug dealer of, I'm not going to give you drugs because that's going to hurt you, but I like to give you tools and things to make it so you have joy, happiness in your life. The problem is it doesn't work immediately. And you could go to the bar right now or the liquor store, and that's going to work really, really quickly. And that's the hard part. One of the teachings, in addition to that parallel line of just shifting the trajectory, and we only have one life to live. Like you've heard on your podcast the other day, you only have one life to live. It's up to to everybody to make that choice. And it can be a struggle, because part of people might be in this place we call contemplation. Part of them really wants to change, and the other part of them really wants to keep drinking. And that's what we call a stuck position. And that can go on for years and years of being torn, being stuck, being conflicted. Very common.
I think alcohol, it reminds me a little bit of the Alien in the movie Alien with Sigourney Weaver, right? It embeds and becomes part of your physiology, and there's no way of getting it out without wreaking absolute havoc on your life, and you need to be prepared for that. I think I want to poke something a little bit here, and then I'll bring Stephen back in. I think one of the things to think about is when you quit alcohol, and I know that a lot of people would say, look, when you quit alcohol, don't stop going out with your mates. Don't do that. Keep going out with your mates and just don't drink, because you need to have fun. Yeah, I think fuck that, actually, because when I went out with my mates, they weren't fun. When I wasn't drinking and they were drinking, they weren't fun. That isn't fun. That isn't the definition of fun. So don't keep going out with your mates just because someone says you should do at all. I mean, by all means, go out in what I call the golden 2 hours, right? So you go to the pub at like 6, 7 o'clock in the evening, you're with your mate, you're all talking about the old days, it's absolutely swinging, everything's great. Why is it great? Because you're communicating, you're connecting, you're having fun and humor in those golden 2 hours. Then get the fuck out of Dodge, because what's going to happen? They're going to get drunk, and all that good juice, all that good stuff, all the reason you love each other, it disappears out the window, right? So what I see is, you're going to be afraid of losing these connections, afraid of losing these people. That is what's going to keep you drinking. That's the wrong way of looking at things, right? Because if you can't connect with these people without a drink, why do you want these people in your life? The other thing is, when these people start to look down on you, to judge you, to call you names, to lull you into drinking with them, there are people who will do that, and there are people who won't do that, but you think they are, right? Just remember that they're looking at you and they are very afraid because they're seeing themselves. It's very often when we find something about someone that it bugs us, it's because we behave in that way very often, right? So be prepared that your friends are going to look at you strange, but then take a deep breath and say to yourself, do you know what? I'm the one doing the right thing here. I know I'm the one doing the right thing. Like, don't get bowled over by that. Now, that's easy when you've got friends. That's easy when you've got family, because you can just avoid these people and hide away. What I want to ask you, Stephen, is what advice would you give people who are in a relationship? So you got a woman, she's been with a guy 50 years. She just realized in her 60s that she doesn't want to drink no more. And she hates it with a passion. She's quit. She's now 6 months sober. But her husband keeps drinking, and his presence in her life and him drinking is affecting her life. But they've been together for 50 years. Mm-hmm. I know it's a really difficult question to put yourself on the spot here, but I'm sure you must have come across it. What kind of advice can you give to people?
Well, it is a challenging spot. There's people feel torn that they're suffering tremendously by the actions of someone else. And when I do intervention work, that's part of my job is to work with everybody, not just the person that's struggling with drinking or drug use or eating disorder or something that's really hurting everyone in the close to them. What I do is I focus on every person that comes to me, because it is a family problem. It is a problem that corrodes into relationships. So the suffering that people feel outside of, concerned about another person like a drinker is sometimes worse and harder because they're sober. The drinker is numbing themselves every day and getting wasted, which feels good, but they're not aware how their behaviors and actions are causing pain for their loved ones, and their loved ones are losing sleep at night. They're feeling anxious all the time. They're walking on eggshells. They're angry. They're frustrated. They feel discouraged and hopeless, and they feel stuck. They've been in a marriage for a long time, or a relationship, or if it's family, that's our blood. We don't give up on family. And it creates a lot of discord in the family. And I just went to a conference where the person, and we were talking about this, the person is addicted to the substance, and the other person, the loved one, is addicted to trying to help the person get rid of the substance. And that's where the breakdown happens. And so what I say to the person that's in a relationship, or a family member, a mom, a dad, or whatever, is everyone has their own personal work to do. And that could be hard to hear, because it's so clear that I'm not the problem if I'm the loved one. The problem is the person that's drinking. They need to get fixed. They need to get better, and then I can be happy. But the reality is the problem is every person in the family, there's a breakdown. There's something that's causing suffering for them. And often at times it's the addiction to trying to help someone that doesn't want help.
So are you saying then that, let's say I'm using this woman in the 60s again, her husband is drinking, it's affecting her life in a negative sense. She's trying to help him, she's trying to help him. She's addicted to helping him all the time because she thinks by helping him it'll improve her life. Are we saying here then that instead of taking that, you've given him the opportunity, he doesn't want to be helped, you need to now turn inward and start looking after yourself? Start doing work on yourself, start looking after yourself and making the decisions that make yourself happy? Is that what we're saying?
So there's a group called Al-Anon, which is for loved ones. That's a 12-step program that gets support for people that are affected by other drinkers. And they have a principle called detach with love. They still love the person, but they're detaching. And I think that is a powerful thing. It's very easier said than done. How to detach from someone we care about, who we see in front of our eyes hurting themselves. There's a knee-jerk reaction as a human being when someone is hurting that we love. We want to help take care of them. But that oftentimes, in what I've coined the term, unhealthy caretaking. So there's nothing wrong with taking care of our loved ones, but there's a line that drifts into what I call unhealthy caretaking, where you start doing things that actually guarantee that person won't change. So if someone starts calling the boss and saying they're sick, or giving them money or things like that, that makes it easier for that person that's drinking to keep drinking. So there's another analogy of the gorilla in the cage. And then I'll get to a solution of how that person who feels stuck, I will give a couple of solutions on how to address that. But we have to understand the problem first. So imagine there's a gorilla in a cage, and the gorilla is the addiction, the alcohol. or whatever. And that gorilla is just going wild. It's partying, it's making a mess, it's pooping everywhere, it's going crazy, and it's messing up this cage. And then you got what we call the loved one, who comes into the cage every day and starts vacuuming and cleaning up everything. They're just vacuuming the cage, they're throwing the poop away, they're doing everything. And then the gorilla is great. He has a maid. He has someone that's going to come in and clean up the cage every day. So next day he's partying, ripping up the room again. And then the person comes in, keeps cleaning up. And that goes on for years. But the day the person that's cleaning up the cage says, I quit. I'm done cleaning up the poop. I'm done cleaning up the mess that you keep making. I'm walking out of this cage. I'm done vacuuming. All of a sudden, the poop starts to pile up. It starts to smell pretty bad in there. And that person, then the fences go up, and they start to realize, I'm not going to always get a bailout. I'm not going to get a bailout for my decisions. The consequences start to pile up. And that's when I start to see a shift for people becoming more willing to get help. Now, how to help the person who's kind of conflicted about, do I stay in this relationship? Do I get out of this relationship? I've been in it for a long time. Is this person going to change? What I say is, first, you got to learn how to take care of yourself and not have your happiness based on whether some person does A or B. Of course, I want every person to live a happy life. I want them to find recovery. When people I work with, that's always the goal, to get them the help they need. Can I control another human being and do something against their will? No. I'm not a police officer. What I can do is give people tools to influence the likelihood that that person gets help. And the first tool that I give them is learning how to take care of ourselves. And how do we do that? Getting as much sleep as we possibly can, taking care of that, exercise, doing the coaching work, the cognitive behavioral therapy that David came on and talked about, which I offer in the coaching I do, reading as much as I can to understand about addiction, how it impacts, getting support from other people that are going through that is invaluable to walk that path. Now, in a practical level, how do we address somebody that's destructive in our lives and do that? So that's what intervention is all about. My job when I do an intervention with a family or a loved one is to empower them to, for the first time, communicate in a very different way, effective way, about how they're being affected by the substance user's behavior. For example, when you drink and get drunk every night, I get really scared. I feel nervous. I feel anxious. I feel really angry, because I want to connect with you and you're under the influence. And this conversation needs to be had when the person's in their right mind, by the way.
Yeah, so sober.
But using what we call I feel statements, or what I messages, where I'm expressing how I'm being affected by the person's behavior. And I do this all the time when I'm working with a coaching client. I tell them, if you want to drink a fifth of alcohol a day, I feel very worried and scared and nervous that could result in your death and kill you. I respect your decision making, but I'm not going to be able to help you change your life. If you want to reserve the right to drink a fifth of alcohol a day, you'll have to come back to me when you've changed your mind with that, because the tools I have are not powerful enough to do that. So a loved one, I help them communicate how they're being affected by the person's behavior. And they can share good memories of the past, how much they love them, how much they care about them, how they're being affected, and how emotionally, like what comes up for them. Are they scared? Are they frustrated? Are they angry? And expressing that. And then the big kicker is asking the person, are you willing to seek help? Are you willing to get an assessment? Are you willing to go and go to a support group? Are you willing to go to a therapist? All these things. And if the person stubbornly refuses to do that, that's really good information for that other person on the motivation of their loved one. If the person says, F you, no, I don't want to, then I help the loved one change their behavior and say, I'm no longer willing to call your boss and say that you're sick. I'm no longer willing to give you money every day because I'm not going to pay your rent anymore if it's a loved one and it's a mom paying the rent, if you're unwilling to get help for yourself, because that's hurting you, and that I know I'm encouraging the behavior you're doing. And that shift it doesn't happen. It's not an ultimatum, all or nothing, that I'm going to leave this marriage, I'm out of it, and I'm divorcing you. But it starts to change that I'm not going to continue to clean up the cage for you anymore. And I hope you choose to make changes. I would love that we make changes as a couple to move forward in our life together, because I love you. I want this marriage to be successful. But I'm at a point where if you want to reserve the right to drink as much as you're drinking every day, I no longer can be in a relationship with that. That wasn't, in my life dream, and that breaks my heart. I want to support you every step of the way to change your life, but if that's not what you're wanting, I want to know that so I can make the changes in my life.
Yeah, I mean, just what comes up for me there, just to recap, is I imagine a lot of people look at the abuser in the relationship and either ignore them, blank them out, because they have tried and failed to try to change them, or they just don't feel they have the power to do it, or they go to them and they ask them the wrong questions, or they use the wrong tactics. And it sounds like if you're in a relationship, one of the best things you can do is learn how to better communicate, so you can use those skills to try and almost take the toxicity out of the conversation. So if somebody is drinking a lot, invariably they're doing it because they're trying to hide some pain. By raising their drinking to the forefront, you're kind of like noticing that they've got pain and they're trying to hide it. So I imagine that's going to kick off into kind of like a big a big argument, and they're going to get defensive. But if you use when you I feel statements like Stephen's saying, and other tools that Stephen and people who are trained interventionists like Stephen, then you will be able to be more artful around how you can explain to the other person how their behavior is making you feel in a negative sense. And I guess also by learning with someone like Stephen, you get to have empathy with the person you're with, because you start to understand that there's a reason why they're behaving in this way, and they need to get to the bottom of why that is. Somehow they're suffering in one way. I think one thing that comes up for me, Stephen, and I know this is a bit of not an easy thing to talk about, but the word love springs to mind. And I think to myself, what does love mean? Like, I'm in a relationship with someone and I say I love them. Why do I love them? What is it about them that I love? Like, I assume I love them because they bring value into my life. They make me happy. They make me smile. They make me, I like it when I'm intimate with them and I make love with them. And so all those things contribute to love. But if that same person is then not doing those things anymore because they're drinking, and they're being abusive, and they're not present, and they haven't got that connection, that love disappears, right? Because I hear people saying, well, I love them, and I'll always love them, so I can't leave them. But is that really true? Doesn't that love just eventually get eroded to nothingness?
So I'm going to love to get to that question and answer that. But before I do, I want to, on the last point with the communication and all that, I want to give their listeners some resources to learn more, so they have that. On my website, www.sfintervention.com/resources, I have taken all of the best books. I spent 10 years reading as much as I can, learning from the best people, the top experts. And like specifically with communication, there's a book that Dr. Burns wrote, who you just had as a guest, who's wonderful, called Feeling Good Together, that has powerful communication skills. There's also a book, and this is all on that page where you can click on it on the site, and it'll take you right to ordering it. Then there's also a book called Nonviolent Communication. That's another wonderful book that talks about these communication skills. There's also on that page a book under intervention, what's called the Craft book, How to Get Your Loved One Sober. And then there's another book called Love First, which is a different model of intervention. And the Craft approach is called Community Reinforcement and Family Training. It's how family members can learn how to positively influence their loved one who's struggling. So that's on there. And there's also other different things that people can go and learn more to get these skill sets. And just starting there is a good starting place. But I wanted to offer that so that your readers or your listeners have something to continue to delve more deeper into the topic. And again, my philosophy is, and David is aligned with this, is tools, not schools. I don't align with any particular school of intervention or therapy or coaching. I just have collected a ton of tools and put that together. And it's like you go to a buffet. You know, not everyone's going to love every item on the buffet, but that's okay. You just got to, don't starve to death. Help yourself on the buffet. Grab different items, see what works, what you like, and there's options for getting mutual support for loved ones. There's a lot of different resources there to get started, and then of course make availability for working with other people that want more one-on-one coaching and specific training. And then I also like to put in a plug that there are resources and workshops that people, loved ones in treatment, the family members go to a family program or a family workshop to learn these skills. And so I always advocate that every person has their own recovery personal growth plan for change. It's not just a one-person problem or whatever. Yeah. But back to your question about love. It's absolutely critical and incredibly difficult to, treat somebody with compassion who is letting us down, who is failing us, who we're angry with. That is where, I have a meditation practice. I have a whole section on mindfulness. They've done a lot of studies on mindfulness and how I just went to a conference here in San Francisco and how mindfulness practice changes the brain to make us more empathic, more compassionate, and it's a big win for people struggling with habits and addictions. It gives us that gap. If we start building in, and there's a lot of books on my site as well about this, if this practice starts to give us that gap where we have a choice whether or not to take that next drink and get that space in there and have some actual tools, because I don't believe anyone can make these changes without getting some tools, especially, it depends how deep you're in it. I think if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably, either curious about someone else or you yourself are curious about learning more about addiction. And so my personal belief is that getting as many tools to change your lifestyle is where the rubber meets the road. And just sitting around and hoping it goes away and hoping it changes, I haven't seen that work for many people. And I'd love to talk about relapse prevention as well at some point in the conversation. But to get to the topic about love, that is critical. So love and compassion and kindness, especially when I'm working with a family member, it's really one of the challenges in working with them to express their compassion to who they care about, who's hurting themselves through substance use, misuse. And a lot of times people view it as they lack willpower, they lack strength, they're just screwing up their life, they're angry. How can they not see this? And the fact is they're doing this because they are getting rewarded by the relationship with alcohol. And most of the time later down the road, if they enter recovery, they end up realizing how much it was hurting themselves and that they were abusing themselves and they were hurting their family members or loved ones. And when they have that insight, it doesn't happen on day one. It completely shifts the whole family. But what I say to the family members is they got to have the ability to communicate in a compassionate way, because if they express to their anger and frustration in an unskillful way, they're likely to have resistance from their loved one. and that person will feel like their family members don't understand them. I remember when my mother used to count my drinks, and it would piss me off. She would count like, you've had 2 drinks, blah, blah, blah. Or she would find, I'd have a bottle behind the desk that I'd hidden, and she'd find it, and I could not stand my mom. I thought she was the worst person in the world trying to ruin the party. But now I have a loving connection with her because she was actually concerned and trying to help me have a better life. But I didn't see it that way.
No. I had the reverse happen, actually. My mum had me when she was 18 on her own. She delivered me on her own. There was no man in her life. Her parents refused to go into hold her hand when she was in labour. And it must have been really difficult for her to raise me. And so I always think about that. However, I had a big fight with her the other day in a car over immigration rules, right? I didn't like the way that she was talking about her views on immigration, particularly because I'm half Chinese. I was very confused about the conversation. And I realized that ever since I've given up drinking, the distance between me and my family has become pretty chasm-like. It's a huge gulf. And I've started to challenge and question, why is there even a relationship? I was watching a TV show last night, and I think someone said on the TV show, but we're family. We'll do anything for family. And I'm watching it thinking, what does that mean? What does that mean? Is this another one of society's rules that we've just grown up with that says, I can't leave this man because I've been in a relationship with him for 50 years. I can't tell my parents that I don't really want to spend time with you anymore because we have nothing in common, and when I do, you just drive me insane. Those are the really tough questions, right?
Right.
Because let's have a look at what's gonna. If you're not gonna be authentic, let's have a look at what happens, right? I don't call my mom. I avoid my mom. Which means the chasm gets wider. When we do see each other, it's inauthentic, it's not natural, it's uncomfortable. We can't talk about what we want to talk about because we're worried that it's going to turn into World War III. So for me, there has to be a time when you look at the man or the woman in your relationship, whoever that may be, and I'm particularly talking about husbands, wives here, I guess, where you have to forget about the rules of life and just look at this person and just say, are they providing me value in my life? I'm only going to have one life and then I'm going to die. Like, is this person going to give me what I need in this life, in this state? And then if the answer is no, get out. And then if the person then ends up getting sober and then shows that they can give you what they need, it's great. And I know that's like so difficult to do, Stephen, right? I've been divorced. I was in a relationship where I couldn't find the balls to leave, and I would have probably stayed there miserable all my life because I felt I'd said the words, I'd said the vows, so I had to stay. But now I'm out of it, I can clearly look back and know that that's conditioning. That was me looking at my parents living with each other miserable for 50 years saying, well, if they did it, I got to do it. Bullshit, you. You know, life isn't like that. You've short, brief glimpse of life. Anyway, there was me getting on my soapbox. Relapse prevention, Stephen. You were talking about relapse prevention. Let's squeeze that in before the end of the podcast.
Okay, yeah, I'd love to. I just made a couple, I'd love to, the relapse prevention, then you had something about like rock bottom, talking about that for a second,
yes,
and then I have like general nuggets of insights that might be good as well. So I just had that on the thing. But real quick on your point about interpersonal conflict, so I see this as to be the rule, not the exception, that especially when, addiction plays in, just in general, I think human beings, there's interpersonal conflict just living in the world. And I don't believe there are any, strict rules that people must do X or Y. But what's great about recovery for all people who get into it is learning skills and tools to navigate that in a skillful way. So I'm all about responding effectively. So if a loved one or someone that does something that I find off-putting in my life, it's not about pointing it out and attacking them. It's about responding to them in a skillful way to let them know how I'm being affected. And that's empowering. I know a lot of people, I was one of them that drank alcohol because I was angry in a relationship. I was angry with my partner, and I didn't have the balls, as you said, to go to her and express that and work that through. But I'm at a point now that I want to work things through with the people I care about, and if they are willing to do that, those are the people I want to have in my life. And I don't feel that there are any rules that you have to stay in something that's abusive. And I want collaboration. And so when I work with people, I give them the tools to have these conversations that a lot of people avoid or go into unhealthy passive-aggressive behaviors, such as getting high all the time as a way of escaping and expressing anger that you're not getting your needs met. So I'm going to go get my needs met from this drug over here, drinking.
Yeah.
And I do believe that it's important, and that is, and we could talk about relapse prevention for a minute, is interpersonal conflict is one of the triggers for people to go back to abusing substances.
Yeah, definitely.
And so I think it's important, and that's the empowering thing about getting into recovery for whether you're a substance misuser or not. Learning these skills is invaluable for just being in the world. And I've learned that having what we would call good boundaries of what is okay and what's not okay for me. And for me, I wouldn't want to be involved with someone that's using drugs every day and abusing that. I would have that conversation at some point, and hopefully if you're entering a new relationship in the beginning of that, to make that expectation. I will put my heart goes out to people that are in that right now, and they've been in for a long time. This is not an easy thing to work through, but like I said, the pot of gold of taking the energy to learn the skills to communicate more effectively and face the elephants in the room, so to speak, makes all the difference. So that's one piece of the personal growth recovery journey.
Yeah, you're talking about being very active there, and you can go into a forum, I guess, and share your story with people. But that's a little more passive. What you're talking about here is really improving your communication skills so you can make a real, I guess if my communication skills were better, I could have dealt with my situation more with my mum a lot easier. And it might not have ended up in the war that it did. So yeah, I really like what you're saying. I think people get a lot out of that.
That's what we call the interpersonal level, like communicating with the world. But the other most effective thing that I find to do this effectively and skillfully, we need to learn how to take care of ourselves and manage our own worlds. And if we're kind of a mess internally, we're going to constantly be lashing out at other people in the world or reacting and very reactive to things that happen. And if you learn the skills how to, self-regulate your own self, and that is very empowering too. And learning, like for example, a lot of people are afraid to be alone. Addiction is a very lonely affliction. We all are built for connection. You learn how to connect authentically with others, and you also learn how to, be with yourself and be comfortable with that. That's really empowering. So when someone is mistreating you, you have options. You're not just holding them hostage, as we say, to make you like another drug. Like, I need you to make me feel good, and if you leave me, I'll be miserable. Well, that's kind of a prison.
Yeah.
And part of the recovery is learning how I can be okay with myself, so then I can, when someone is mistreating me, let them know, and then it's up to them. If they want to continue mistreating me, or continue abusing drinks or whatever, then I have more information to make decisions with my life. And that's easier said than done. It's definitely a process that requires work and training, and there's a lot of good resources and therapists and workshops and ways to get into this. And the main message is no one has to stay stuck unless they want to in the status quo. But it's the most popular choice. I don't know if David talked about that in terms of relationship, what we call decision making. There's always three options. Stay in the relationship and just put up with it, which is the most popular, and just hope it gets better. Leave the relationship and get out, which is I'm okay with people doing that. And option 3 is work really hard at looking at what we're doing. This is the popular one, but the most effective.
Yeah, it just reminded. I just read an Eckhart Tolle quote exactly the same as that. You know, when you're faced with a problem, you know what I mean. You can either get out of it, fix it, or just deal with it. You know, and you were saying that. Well, I was reading on your blog. You don't believe you have to hit rock bottom in order to kind of like get to work on this stuff. I agree with that as well. Just share a little bit about your wisdom on that.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. So, and it's just been a pleasure. I want to say how I've really enjoyed our conversation. It's great, and I hope that anything that I've offered is one voice and one person, and there's lots of people out there that have this, and just hope it is helpful to somebody and to make changes in their life today. But I am a big believer that this myth that you have to kind of get to the bitter end before you make a change. And I've seen people, I've gone into detox wards in New York City and seen people on their deathbed, and they're dying of, cirrhosis of the liver and medical issues as a result of their alcohol use, and they still cannot connect the dots that there's a problem. I've seen, people not able to make that thing that, oh, there's a problem. They kind of just get angry if you even talk to them. And they just want to be left alone, and they're unable to connect the dots, and they're physically dying of alcohol-related issues, and that's always heartbreaking. So just hoping that time passing or more consequences or the next crisis is going to wake someone up, not always. Not always. A lot of times when I get a call, it is when there's a crisis, because people aren't jumping for joy. It's not like I'm selling headphones or something like that. Yeah. So the thing that I want to hammer in on is I've gotten calls where someone's called me for an intervention, said, let's wait and see what happens. And I always get nervous with that because they want to kind of see what happens. And then I get a call 6 months later and the person's been in a tragic accident and they're in a coma. That happened, and someone's in a coma because they were in an accident while under the influence of alcohol. And that's where I say, and it's so important to take action when you're feeling that there is an issue. The sooner, the better. There was a documentary done by HBO with one of the leading experts, Tom McClellan, who's out of the University of Pennsylvania, and they've done studies that pinpoint that addiction begins in youth. It begins in adolescence. It doesn't come out of the blue. A lot of times it's tracked to the beginning, and the sooner that it's addressed, like I said with the parallel lines, the whole trajectory of that person's life is different. So kind of waiting it can be dangerous and highly risky. But some people need to learn their own lessons, that's for sure. But loved ones don't need to sit around and be held hostage by someone else's behavior before making changes. That's the other important point. And I'm a big believer at, as soon, and I'm biased too. I got lucky when I was 21 to have a series of events where I was open to trying something different. And that's where I would like to give that, and all the research suggests that. Another thing I want to put out there is the Surgeon General here in the U.S. for the first time put out a landmark report about the addiction crisis in our country, about substance misuse. And this is as big as tobacco use was 50 years ago. And that is a 400-page document, which you can get by just Googling Surgeon General Addiction Report. And it talks about all of these concepts in detail. So people that are interested in learning more, there's so much of a wealth of resource there. So that's kind of on rock bottom, and kind of what intervention is designed to do is to raise the bottom, to kind of get a person to say, what would you like for your life? Would you like to go down this path, or would you like to go down this path? It's up to you. And that conversation is so important for many people to at least what I call plant the seed. They might not change their behavior today. They might continue to go to the pub and do their thing, but at least the seed's planted, knowing, like you had brought up, some of your friends, like they're judging, they're angry, they're seeing that there's another path here than just partying all the time.
Yeah, I think in my quiet time, reflecting back on my split from people, I realized that I was to blame largely for that as well. I created this story that people left me, When I look back now, I can see that I left a lot of people because I didn't want to be in their lives. I didn't want to be surrounded. I didn't want to go to the pub and sit around the bar talking about the football. Suddenly, I don't know why, when I got sober, I just started talking about philosophy, and like I was interested in the meaning of life and meaning and purpose and love and why I was feeling the way I was. And if I was to speak like that to some of my mates, they'd think I was mental or something. So I didn't want to be in that position. So that's why I created a podcast, so I could speak to people like you about it, Stephen.
Yeah. I've definitely had a lot of people, look at me in different ways and think I'm crazy. I've had all kinds of different conversations, but, and different reactions. And, it's like tobacco was 50, plus years ago, and how doctors were giving out cigarettes. It's starting to catch up that, alcohol is a drug, and it's one of the most deadly when used in severe. The tolerance, and people do die. The other thing to put out there is, if someone is very severe, it is so important that you don't quit cold turkey. It's important you get to a hospital to go through a formal detox where you're getting medications, because people do have seizures and die with that. That's how severe it can get. Yeah. And not everyone knows that. They think it's very accepted here. And also I know in the UK is a real, a lot of alcohol and part of the culture. And what I'm kind of confused by looking now back at my life, and don't get me wrong, I love to have fun and party, but why we celebrate as a society falling down drunk and passing out and throwing up and, just carrying on versus living a life of purpose and helping contribute something and taking care of ourselves is kind of something that's hard for me to grasp now looking back.
Yeah, I the last podcast I just did was an Ask Me Anything, where somebody asked me my views on turning vegan and quitting caffeine. And I posted it on my Facebook wall, and someone commented on there, I've just listened to your podcast. It looks like you've just given up everything in life. And there is a view. People look at me and think, wow, you've just given up life, man. Like, your life is just terrible. My life has never been better. It's a huge myth that going to the pub, and just a very, very simple example, is going to watch a rock concert. Sober compared to drunk. Just one example. I don't remember ever a single guitar being strung in any of the ones I used to go when I was drunk. Like, how is that possibly a good experience, right? So I think that there's this worry that once you quit that you're effectively ending life. And that's because we are all kind of in our own little worlds, and we look around and this is my world, here are my 5 friends, here's my family, here's my pub, here's my shop, and we don't go out of those confines. And it's why when we look at someone, like, this is one of the arguments I had with my mum the other day. My wife Liza, she sent me a documentary of this couple who had raised their child traveling around the world, and the documentary was filmed with the voice of the child narrating his life. And I told my mum that I wanted to homeschool Liza and do something similar, but I was scared. And my mum's view was, well, that's ridiculous. If you homeschool your child, that's wrong. You're a bad parent because you're taking them away from community and people, thinking that I would just lock her in the house and not let her see anyone, and not understanding the great community and the wealth of knowledge that you'll get by, experiencing these different cultures. So I just think everyone needs to just be very wary of our own cognitive biases, I think, and have an open mind. Stephen, I've got to shoot, I'm afraid. I've got to take my wife to a massage.
Nice.
She bought me a massage for Christmas, and I've very kindly given it back to her because I think she deserves it more than me. So I've actually got to cut it a little bit short and take her to a massage. But I do want to end by saying thank you for quitting alcohol. Probably one of the most difficult times to quit, right? You're 21. That's a tough time to quit. Peer pressure's excruciating at that age. And then to spend your life... I know you was a talented musician when you was younger, and you could have gone on and done that. And instead, you're going to detox wards where people are dying, and you're trying to help people, and you see all this pain and sorrow, but you get a lot of ecstasy out of it. It's like David Burns says, he enjoyed every single one of his sessions, and you strike me as someone who's exactly the same. So I just want to thank you very much for doing all the work that you're doing, and for coming on the Alcohol Addiction Podcast and sharing your wisdom with people. I really appreciate our chat.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure. And for people, sorry we didn't get to the relapse prevention people, want to learn more, there's a section on my website that has education, and I've taken all the nuggets that I've researched and put that on there. And so there's a whole thing about there, just since we didn't get to that. But it's been a joy talking to you and connecting and sharing my experience and professional experience. And absolutely, I hope that your listeners got something of value and enjoy your massage.
No. Enjoy my taxi ride to the massage. I'm not the one getting the massage.
Oh, got it. Okay, got it. Yeah, enjoy the taxi ride.
Thank you, Stephen.
Yeah. Okay, take care.